Hey everybody!
What's up?
So, this is going to be one of those where I kind of defer to you, because I've watched this movie about 2 to 3 times. I'm still not sure what I've watched.
Well, okay, we're going to talk about Blade Runner #1 first of all.
I've seen it's the final cut.
Okay, so you saw what is effectively the last version that the director supports. Or at least Scott supports that.
I know there's a
When was the first time you saw this movie? Like, the very first time? Because everybody's got the first time they saw Blade Runner and how it affected them.
Like a couple weeks ago.
So you had never seen Blade Runner until you watched the final cut?
I think I'd seen like bits and pieces here and there on like TV, but like watching it all the way through is very recent, that I remember anyway.
Right.
Like I'm sure my dad watched it and I watched part of it. Like,
right. Well, Blade Runner, it's one of I think only 2 movies that I'm aware of that have as many cuts as it does. It's got like 7 different cuts.
Yeah.
There's like the theatrical release, the director's cut, the fan cut, like 2 made-for-TV cuts. There's at least 1 foreign language cut that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
that's specifically for another language, and then there's the final cut.
Yeah.
Which was released in 2007. And the weirdest part of all this is no cut is like the perfect way to watch this movie. With the theatrical cut, the producers and the studio execs went in and told Ridley Scott, said, look, people aren't going to make any fucking sense out of this movie. Add like a narration or a voiceover or something. And so he was like, alright, fine, fuck you, I will. And he got with Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford just delivers the most bland voiceover narration for it. It's awful. You can tell he does not want to be there, and he is doing this in 1 take, and he's not doing it anymore. And once he's done, he's done.
Yeah.
Because you can hear it in his voice when he's doing it. It's like, the rain was cold. I sat there for a while under a newspaper eating noodles. She walked into my office. I hate it. And it's just, it's really weird. The only thing it has over it is there's 1 scene at like the very end and some narration explaining what should have been an immediate understanding that Deckard understood the plight of what replicants are going through, and he understands them a little better.
Yeah.
Having spent so long hunting them and seeing them die in horrible ways when all they wanted effectively was what everyone else in the universe takes for granted, which is more than 4 years of life.
Yeah.
Because the Nexus 6 replicants are constructed, fully formed, with a whole lot of knowledge about things, but they're only given 4 years to live.
Yeah.
And most all of those are spent doing like hard manual labor or combat. Basically shit no one else wants to do.
Yeah.
So you have this class dichotomy that's effectively just completely and totally miserable for an entire group of people that only want what everyone else wants.
This, like, the cut I watched didn't have, like, the narration, and
no.
It just seems kind of all over the place, like, because, like, there's the replicant that doesn't know that she's a replicant, and it kind of introduces her out of nowhere, and then...
Well, that's kind of the point.
Rachel's
the first of her kind. They were experimenting with seeing if implanting memories in a replicant would cushion the blow of them realizing they only had X amount of lives, or X amount of years. In so doing, they would be able to temper off some of their aggression to being like, fuck! I don't want to live I just want to live more! What's wrong with that?
And then there's, like, the scene where he runs into the one that is, like, the snake, the chick with the snake, and she had, like, a fake... And then he just runs and kills her. Like, they have a chase scene through the street.
Well, replicants aren't allowed on Earth.
Yeah.
They're to be shot on sight if they're detected. And actually, this leads into one of the greatest things. It was the first movie I ever watched that really said how language can be used against me. Because they don't call viciously murdering an automaton in the middle of the street by any means necessary killing. It's called retirement. So that way, when it's printed, it says they were retired. Like in the newspaper, you don't read man guns down woman robot trying to flee for her life. It reads rogue synth retired by heroic Blade Runner. And so that was really my first big introduction in movies that gave the idea that language could subvert and destroy in a non-overt fashion. Like the biggest way I'd seen that done was in like satire, Mel Brooks, Paul Verhoeven with like RoboCop, and that was like my first big exposure to that, and so that always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's just with this, like,
Well, lay some of your questions on me. I usually end up bringing a lot of questions to these reviews, so question and I will explain, because I love this movie.
I mean, I didn't watch, like I said, I didn't watch one with the narration, so...
It's okay, that version is not that great.
Yeah, it just seems kind of like it was all over the place.
Well, how do you mean?
Like, it just kind of like, it made very large jumps to, like, I was like, when did he piece all this together, that this person...
That's one of those things you just kind of have to take with it. Unfortunately, yeah, that is kind of just rather abrupt that he finds the photos in Leon's apartment.
Yeah.
And from there, he's able to use his little zoom in and enhance Philips CDI to...
I love how this was someone's vision of this year.
Well, that's really what I really like about this movie. It sets so many trends and tropes for how cyberpunk is kind of worked throughout all of its history. Things that I love a lot. Ghost in the Shell leans heavily from Blade Runner. But the idea that we kind of got to a point in our history, in our creation span, and then it just kind of didn't go anywhere. And that is always... I've always liked that visual aesthetic. Cowboy Bebop draws on it a lot.
Like, every movie, like, that was set, like, 40 years ago, like, Back to the Future and Blade, they all were like, well, they'll be in flying cars, and...
Well, to be fair, there was talk of it happening by then, and I still think we should have had it by now. But... No, I've always liked this version, the gritty and the grimy version, that essentially those with power kept getting more power and more power and more power, and everybody who was underneath that just was never allowed to go anywhere else. And so you have the entire social structure of those with money and power stay in money and power, and those without don't. It's a really great portion when Deckard gets drawn back into the Blade Running game when he meets the police commissioner, and he tells him, he's like, you're either one of the cops or you're nobody.
Yeah.
And that establishes that people with power, no matter how small, immediately have bigger status than anyone else.
Yeah, it kind of, when it started, like, this one just, like, immediately starts with, like, a replicant, like, mowing somebody down.
Well, that's how they all start. Yeah. It all starts with Leon taking the Voight-Kampff test, which is to test for an emotional empathic response. And they all start with him blowing the guy away, essentially.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the story follows 4 replicants. One, I want to say he was a construction model. He was meant for heavy lifting and power stuff. One assassin model, which is the stripper that they meet with the snake. One pleasure model, which is Daryl Hannah, Pris. And one combat model, which is Roy Batty, Rutger Hauer's character.
Yeah.
And they all come to Earth trying to find Tyrell and try and get him to engineer more years into them, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But this movie has always stuck with me, if for nothing else than just how amazingly striking and different the visual aesthetics of everything about it are. Like I say, it's one of my favorite looking movies of all time. Everything just drips of a fully constructed and realized world that this would exist in.
I just don't understand why there's so many cuts to it. Like, I think I can understand, but man, like, what do these, how many have you seen, and what all are they supposed to add?
I've seen three different ones. I've seen the director's cut, but I don't really remember exactly what they did different in it. I've seen the theatrical release version, which has one scene at the very end where Deckard and Rachel drive off together, and he narrates about how he understands the plight of the replicant and how they're actually people as well.
Yeah.
It's his realization that being a Blade Runner is not a good thing, that replicants can be just as great as humans. And I've seen the final cut, and the final cut I like for 99.9% of it, but then it comes down to the very end, like right before that final scene that happens in the theatrical cut, where they drive off together, is cut.
I was about to say, I don't think I remember watching that.
That's because that's cut, and with that cut, and without that narration at the end, it's more ambiguous as to whether or not Deckard himself is a replicant.
I never picked up on, like, I know there's
it's one
a
of those
theory.
It's one of those subtle things that happens throughout. Edward James Olmos' character, Gaff,
Yeah.
is constantly making origami figures.
Yeah.
He makes the first one in the police commissioner and the police guy's office, and I want to say it's like chicken, which is like a subtle jab at him. He makes another one at Leon's apartment, which is a little man.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And then the last one you see is the unicorn that Deckard finds, which is from a dream sequence, which I'm fairly certain Ridley Scott just used some of the leftover footage he had from Legend and just inserted this. It's just like, look, just cut it before you meet the devil, okay? It'll be fine. And it kind of gives the implication that Deckard has implanted memories, and Gaff knows about this. And that Deckard is a replicant. The problem is, with that ending, it undercuts all of the character development that Deckard would have gone through in learning and understanding that replicants are just as good as people, and understanding that he is worth something more than just killing.
I was going to say, I never really, I never really looked at it like that.
It helps if you know about Ridley Scott saying that's what the end is. The problem is that Harrison Ford says that's complete total shit.
I was about to say, I don't think he can be a replicant, because the next one is like 30 years, and he would be long dead.
Well, that's the thing. Rachel was developed without a shut-off date.
Okay.
And so the theory is that Deckard is also one of these and just has implanted memories. Again, the problem stands that really undercuts his character. And it really, really just hamstrings the ending right at the finish line, where it would normally just cross into being frickin' awesome movie that I would love forever and ever. I still do.
I think I need to watch a different cut. I didn't watch that.
It helps.
Cut.
I'll see if I can't I'll see if I can't track down a copy of the theatrical version. I think I've got one on VHS somewhere. But yeah, without that extra snippet at the end, the implication that Deckard is not human just absolutely bombs the movie.
Yeah.
And it really, this is kind of my biggest concern going into Blade Runner 2049, is which version are they going to go with? If they go with the version of Ridley Scott's ending, then Deckard's going to be a replicant, and all of the last movie essentially means nothing.
I don't know. I've heard it's long, and I've heard it. I talked to somebody who
It's close to 3 hours long.
I talked to somebody who they liked the first one, and he was like, I don't know what I just watched. He's like, I'm so confused.
Well, that's kind of what I enjoy about the first one. It almost requires multiple watchings to get a concrete view of what is going on with it. And all of the time, always, that's a good way. Each time you discover something new and different about it. Like, even rewatching this as the final cut, I was so much more invested in the world and just how it looked and moved and felt, because I didn't have this boring narration sucking me out every single minute.
I think with Harrison Ford reprising his role and him saying that Deckard's not a replicant, he would probably play it like that.
I would assume Harrison Ford's one of those guys, if he didn't want to do something, you're going to tell he doesn't want to be there. But I love this movie a ton just for its visual aesthetics alone, and how much it inspired so many more things that I love later down the road through its art style, its philosophical debates, and it qualifies as the second book that I like even more than, or the second movie version of a book that I like even more than the original, which is, this movie is based off of Philip K. Dick's short story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Which I'm not even going to get into that. It's a good story.
Isn't that the one you let me borrow?
No, that is an Isaac Asimov compilation of short stories.
Okay.
Totally different stuff. But I like this version so much more. But again, Blade Runner has just always been that fantastical, basically the white whale that I'm always chasing, trying to get the perfect version to. And it's just, I know it's never going to happen. Because when it comes down to it, you either have the version that has the narration that cements the idea that Deckard is human and has learned to be more, or you have the version that leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not he's a machine. And all the things that he's done are nothing more than programs written inside him. So
yeah, that's kind of
it's astounding. Just, I love it and I hate it at the same time. It's a horrible, horrible divisiveness inside me. I love it for its visuals, its deep philosophical meanings, and its attitudes towards life.
I wonder how they're gonna play. Like, I guess we're gonna have to see, but with this world that never happened.
Yeah.
Because this is like,
well,
the
I don't
next
know.
one
I mean,
said 2049. This one, I wonder if they're gonna write in a parallel world.
Oh, I doubt it.
Or
I doubt it. I mean, we're already past the point where we think Blade Runner is even remotely possible at happening. Yeah. But at least I hope they don't. Then again, I mean, there's a lot of really weird parallels. I mean, if you had told me a year ago that, yeah, Atari would make a huge comeback with a new console, I would have said, get the fuck out of my face, asshole. And here we are with Atari set to release a new console for this generation, and I'm like, I don't know what's what anymore.
I wasn't even aware of that until you just told me.
Yeah. No, I've always enjoyed a lot of it. In the first shot of the movie, it cements that this is not a perfect world. There's a broken advertisement sign on one of the buildings where it just flashes half of the Coca-Cola logo. And the other time, it's like the massive side of the building ones are perfect in what they do. And so it cements very quickly that there are different tiers to this world. That there are going to be parts of it that work and parts that don't. Just the fact that there aren't that many actual flying cars and there's so much foot traffic in the movie speaks a couple of different volumes about it, and how most of the flying cars you see are police vehicles.
Yeah.
Like, this is a technology that exists, but it's being denied to the market of people, and that is exclusively available to this group. I also like it's never quite said how the world works, but it seems like there are no actual nations anymore. Everything it's in the
Yeah.
movie they talk about it being sectors. I'm from Sector 4, Sector 8, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a huge mishmashing of Western and Eastern stylings. There's a little bit of
Yeah, because he just like goes to like the Chinese noodle place. It's like just
it starts with him ordering some Chinese food, and there's a lot of Asian influences. The geisha with the Coke commercial.
Yeah.
He goes and talks to a guy in like a Moroccan fez and like this Egyptian Middle Eastern style area where they have a lot of different trappings and stylings of that area. And so it really feels like this is no longer a world where we are divided, but at the same time,
We're totally divided.
no, not that we're totally divided.
It's like the
We just
classing system.
we just came to this realization that nothing means anything, and we didn't go beyond what we had.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
So, like I say, Blade Runner has always been one of my favorite movies. I really hope the sequel does its justice, because it would really suck if I had to walk out of this theater when we see this movie and say, "That was a giant piece of shit." Because I had to do that with Highlander.
Which one?
2. You bet your ass I didn't walk out of Highlander 1 and say that was a giant piece of shit. That movie's amazing.
No,
I was also like 2, I think, when that movie came out. So.
Well, I was about to say Highlander 2 is so weird, but then Highlander 3 basically cancels Highlander 2 out.
Well, that's kind of the comparison I have to this. There are so many other cuts of this movie, I almost compare it to Highlander 2 in trying to find the perfect version. Because you have the fan edit, you have the collector's edit. There's like 4 or 5 different cuts of Highlander 2. Most of them remove Zeist, and each one changes something just a little bit to make it an entirely different movie.
Okay, I've only seen one cut ever of
But
Highlander 2.
again, with Highlander 2, there is no perfect cut. And so it really it's stuff like this that makes me want to see more of what movies come out like this. If people can reinterpret and reconstruct a movie into something entirely different. And I love when something like that happens. Did you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
No, it's just one of those. I'm probably gonna have to go back and rewatch this a couple more
I'd
times.
strongly recommend you do that before you go see the sequel.
Yeah, it's just because I was left more, but I've only like solidly watched this like 2 times so far.
Yeah, Blade Runner is definitely one of those movies. It gets better the more you watch it. The first time you watch it, you'll probably be more confused than you will anything else, but it's definitely one of those you don't regret watching it again.
No.
And each time you find something different and something better that you like more.
I think I'm definitely gonna have to like find different cuts.
I'll try and dig out my old copy of the theatrical cut so I can see that. Yeah, Harrison Ford's VO in that is absolutely abysmal. It's just really, really obvious he does not want to be in this recording studio. He's not going to give his A game, and it's just. I'm just sitting there. Even as a kid, when I was watching it, it's just like, God damn, you were Han Solo and Indiana Jones. Put some effort into it. Fuck it. And it was just like, God, I love what I'm seeing, but every time Harrison Ford opens his mouth when he's not Deckard, I'm just so bored.
I'll probably be able to track that down somewhere.
I do and I don't recommend it for basically the reasons that I gave.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys.
Sorry, we figured we would give thoughts and ideas about the first one before we went and saw the second one.
Let us know what you thought about Blade Runner.
Did it change you and your ideas as much as it changed ours? Or mine, at least?
Yeah.
I really cannot say how much of an influence this movie had on me as a kid.
Or did you live up Blade Runner lists like I did?
I don't know how you grew up then.
Highlander.
Not a bad one, but still.
Alright, guys. Well, until next time, we will see you guys later.
So when are we going to go see the My Little Pony movie?
We could get Trudy and Christina to come in and do a review because I dropped them off the other night at it. They can do a complete review without us on my channel.
Oh, that's up to you then.
Alright. Later, guys.
Later.